All right, I'm going to make a video talking a little bit more about riding on my Poseidon X because I have been enjoying it a lot. I've been enjoying it more and more over time. And I think, that's kind of something that happens when you start riding your bikes is the more you configure them, the more that you upgrade them and put things on your bike particular to what you like to do, it starts to become yours. And so just more and more over time, it's become, one of the most comfortable bikes I've ever ridden. Now that we have the electric bike, the Expedition, I no longer have to ride this bike as a father-son configuration. We can do all of the shepherding of our child on the electric bike, which has been amazing. And it's been able to turn the Poseidon back into kind of its original thing where it's like a touring. If I'm riding around town picking up groceries, if I know I'm going to go on a ride that I want to have a change of clothing, things like that, because I have a bike rack, I have panniers. So it's very close to the riding that I was accustomed to when I came to this city. I really have been appreciating it. Some of the upgrades that I've done on it, I put on some Specialized tires, which have really transformed that. One of the things that's transformed it more than I really thought it would was having those Specialized Pathfinder Pros. There's certain things about gravel bikes that I like in any case is that they're really good at descending. They're really good at going downhill. And one of the things that you may not know if you don't live in Seattle is it's a very hilly place. Meaning, okay, the tough part is going down uphill, but also going downhill can be terrifying if your bike doesn't have good brakes or if your bike doesn't have a stable geometry where it feels stable going downhill. And that's the one thing I have to say about the two gravel bikes that I have, and the electric bike too, is that the slightly longer chain stays and the geometry and everything like that and the head tube angle really make pointing these bikes downhill, that coupled with the wider tires, make pointing it downhill like fun, like where you can go down pretty steep descents. And over time I've just become more and more comfortable because they're just so stable. Both the Fazari and the Poseidon X are super amazing at pointing downhill, and that's something until you've experienced it in the city, because you might not realize it, but you don't want to tear down hills in the city. There's just too much going on. Maybe when you're in a more wilderness setting, going down hills and like kind of letting loose is what you want to do. But in the city, you kind of always have to be checking where random objects, cars, people, whatever are coming from. And so you always have to kind of make sure you're not just smashing down that hill in a way that you can't control it. And I wanted to use that as a segue to talk about speed, because the one thing I feel like you do sacrifice on the gravel bike is a little bit of speed. The Cannondale that I used to have, it was a faster bike. My touring bike, it was a faster bike, but it didn't ride as stably. The acceleration was snappier, it was livelier and twitchier. It was actually really fun handling bike, but until you pointed it downhill. And it was really fast on the flats, but then when you pointed it downhill, a little bit more sketchy. Knowing what I know now to probably put wider tires on it, I could have gone up to 38 and I was riding on 32s, and that probably would have helped me a little bit. But the geometry was kind of more, a little bit more oriented to like a road bike than the gravel bikes, which are kind of a blend of, they have very mountain bikey type of aspects to it. So one thing about the Cannondale was that it was super fast, but not super stable. So if you're pointing it downhill, there's a little sketch to it. And, clearly riding over wet leaves and things like that in the wintertime can be super treacherous. And if your bike isn't as stable when it hits wobbly stuff, if it's more twitchy, when it hits wobbly stuff and wet leaves, it tends to, be harder to get back into a stable position once it gets really wobbly. So that can just cause for more accidents. And whereas I felt like the time I have had a problem on my gravel bike is when the front tire is deflated. Like every time I just kind of topple over on have a crash, I check my front tire and it's usually just out of air, something happened. And so if my tires are at the right pressure, I haven't really had a problem on a gravel bike. But like I said, the one time is like when I'm leaving the driveway and my bike just turns and totally gives out. I'm like, it doesn't have it. I kind of know that feeling now. That's happened a few times on my rides, and I was able to over time diagnose them. But over the long course of time, I've realized that, whereas the gravel bike gives up a little bit of speed, and again, it doesn't give up that much speed because I look at speed as overrated, right? Speed in a straight line with the smoothest surface that you could possibly find. Yeah, okay, sure, you're fast. But are you fast when a pothole comes? Are you fast when the surface changes? Are you fast when there's a little bit of gravel or grit on the road? Are you fast when there are leaves on the road? And those are the things that the gravel bike is just able to stomp through in ways that the road bike has to avoid and dodge with a more, a road bike with a skinnier tire setup and things like that. So that's the reason that over time I've just really appreciated riding this style of bike. And I realized that it can pretty much, because of the gear ratios too, I can climb pretty much anything that I want, and I can go pretty fast. If I wanted to go faster on the Poseidon, I could put a bigger chain ring up front. I'm not sure how big the biggest single that you could put on is. But, I would consider, if I was wanting to go really fast or ride with Dan on the Fazari, at this point I would consider putting a 46 on the Fazari, because I could go a little bit faster and I could still climb a bunch of things, and I still would have a 1-to-1 ratio on a bike that, I don't really take it up to anything treacherous. I feel like maybe if I was going on more intense rides, I would make that chain ring smaller. If I was going up mountains and stuff, I might ride a 38 and put a different chain on it. But ultimately, I've realized that over time, all types of speed are not equal, and I'd rather be fast on a gravel bike in the city with all the different obstacles and different surfaces you have to avoid than be fast on a road bike where I'm scared to go downhill and I'm scared to hit any sort of obstacles on the road. So that's kind of, so in a way this video is kind of talking about speed and how it can be overrated, and how a gravel bike is a perfect configuration for me where I still feel fast, but I've sacrificed maybe that top end speed for a way more stable, comfortable, and upright ride.